Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Goosebumps TV show episode review. And today we're going to be talking about The Haunted Mask. This is a two-part episode directed by Timothy Bond from the very first season. It was the inaugural episode of the entire show. And arguably, it was the best episode the show ever got based on mainstream opinion. I tend to agree with that. I think this episode is genuinely perfect, from the acting choices down to the performances, the setting, the practical effects, the music score, and just how well it delivers the product. This is just one of those situations in the TV show where everything just went perfectly right, and I think for all of the right reasons. I don't think this is my all-time favorite episode, but I definitely think it's my number 2 all-time favorite episode because it's so good. So yeah, off the bat, if you have never watched this TV episode, you need to watch it because it is outright amazing. Also, a little disclaimer, if you're looking for a physical copy here in America, there is no DVD version of it, so if you want a physical, they do have a VHS. It's pretty reasonable to find. I recently found mine at a antique store. So now I have a physical in my collection. So if you're out there trying to get your hands on a copy, you might have to get a VHS player, but there's that. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So the episodes from time to time change up source material from the books. This is one of those episodes that do subtle changes here and there. It starts off in the story with Carly Beth, the main character, and her friend Sabrina are walking by this Halloween store. It's a day or two before Halloween. It's nighttime. It's cold outside. You know, it feels like fall and autumn outside where they're at in the location of the episode, which is off the bat very appealing to the eyes of the viewer, which I want to applaud Timothy Bond for giving that aesthetic. Carly Beth and Sabrina are out looking for pumpkins, and they go into the pumpkin patch, and before you know it, there's a jump scare thrown at you, and you get to meet these two characters called Chuck and Steve. And Chuck and Steve have decided to hide out in the pumpkin patch to scare Carly Beth, because Carly Beth is just easy to scare. And then when the two boys scamper off, Sabrina and Carly Beth talk, and Carly Beth says, you know, I don't know why they pick on me. And Sabrina kind of admits to Carly Beth that, you know, you're just pretty scareable. And she goes, I'm not. And like they have this confrontation about it, and Carly Beth's like, I'm not that scareable. Sabrina says, well, yeah, you kind of are. And Carly Beth vows to get back at them this Halloween. She doesn't know how she's going to do it yet, but she's going to get revenge on these two kids, Chuck and Steve. It then cuts to her coming home, and she meets her mom after coming home from, you know, her art class, and she brings home this plaster of Paris head, and it's this weird sculpture that looks just like Carly Beth, right? And Carly Beth is already upset about the whole Chuck and Steve thing that happened to her right before she got home, and she goes and sees this creepy plaster of Paris head, and she tells her mom, like, hey, that thing just smiled at me. And Carly Beth's mom says, you know, don't let your imagination get to you. And she's like, you know, I've had enough today. I'm just going to go upstairs. And when she goes upstairs, she hears something in her room, and she opens the door, and it's her brother Noah, who is wearing this Halloween costume that her mom made her. And it's this duck costume that she brought up to her a few months back, saying something on the lines of, wouldn't it be cool to be a duck for Halloween? And then you get to meet Noah, the little brother character in the story, and he's kind of a little weasel, I would say. Noah is just, you know, picking on Carly Beth. He's also kind of like a Chuck and Steve who just finds Carly Beth easy to scare, which Carly Beth gets really annoyed, cutting into the next day, which I believe in this version of the story, it's Halloween day. She goes to school, and there's an outdoor picnic thing where everybody's wearing their Halloween costumes, and Carly Beth is about to eat some lunch. And Chuck and Steve approach Carly Beth and are trying to apologize for scaring her and try to give her a peace offering, which is this sandwich. And she goes, okay, you know, thanks. And then she goes to eat the sandwich, and there's a worm inside of the sandwich. Very similar to the book, which, fun fact, the actress Catherine Long, who played Carly Beth in this episode, bit into a live worm because Timothy Bond wanted to capture a genuine reaction. How gross is that? So when I watch this scene, I know that it's real, and it gets to me every time now that I watch it. But she bites into the sandwich, and she says how disgusting, it's a worm, and she looks around, and all the kids are laughing at her, and she runs off, and she runs home, and she runs into her room, and she sees the duck costume on her bed, and in a fit of being really upset, she rips up the duck costume and grabs money from her dresser and runs up to this mask shop from earlier on in the episode. When she walks up to the mask shop, she sees that it's about to close, or it's already closed, and she decides to let herself in anyway. And then she's greeted by the shop owner, who says, "Hey, we're closed," and she's like, "Well, I'm just trying to buy a mask for Halloween." So he lets her look around for 5 minutes, and she's looking around. She can't really find the mask she's looking for. The shop owner goes on the phone and looks distracted, and she sees this door near the back of the shop as she goes into it, and she sees these 6 really gross looking masks that catch her eye, and to the far left is the haunted mask. Now I'm going to say this off the bat. The haunted mask, the cover is pretty iconic, but the mask in this episode is pretty terrifying. I mean, it looks great. I honestly think it looks way better than the cover art that Tim Jacobus did. No offense to Tim Jacobus, but the mask here, whoever did the mask, did an excellent job on that. So, hats off to you. So when Carly Beth tries to pick up the mask to see what it looks like or feels like, she's interrupted by the shop owner, who slams the door shut and lets her know that these masks aren't for sale. And Carly Beth says, "Well, why aren't they for sale?" And the shop owner basically tells her that these masks, they were made to be beautiful, and they turn ugly, and they're just too real to sell her. And he couldn't live with himself if he did it. But Carly Beth, tries to give a reason behind why she wants a mask, and he seems kind of agreeable, but then he says, "No, I'm just not going to sell you the masks." So Carly Beth decides to take the mask, which you should never do, by the way. Kids out there watching, you should never take something. Well, she takes the mask and throws money at him. And she runs out the store, and when she realizes that what she was doing is stealing, she has a second thought to go back inside and return it, but the shop owner closes the door and puts the close sign on. So then she turns around and goes home, and right around, it's probably early afternoon, getting ready to go for kids to go in the town to go trick-or-treating. So she gets home to get ready, and she goes up into her room to try the mask on for the first time, and she notices how creepy it looks, and then she decides to test it out on her brother Noah, who just got finished getting ready in his costume, and she jumps out and scares him, and then her brother Noah was like, "Wow, that was actually pretty scary." And you start to see that this mask is giving her this voice that is in her voice. But Carly Beth, when she's trying to take the mask off to reveal her face to Noah, to say "gotcha," she was playing around saying she's having a hard time taking the mask off, which kind of preludes into what happens later on in the story, but I'll get to that in just a sec. So basically, Carly Beth says, "Hey, gotcha, Noah," and then Noah's like, "Can I try it on?" She goes, "Maybe later." And she runs downstairs to go finish off her costume because she's going to grab the plaster of Paris that her mom made and put it on a broomstick and take a red scarf, make it look like blood, to try to scare Chuck and Steve, because she found the perfect mask to do so. And she grabs the head. The mom gets distracted on the phone, and she walks out saying, "Hey, I'm going to Sabrina's house. I'll see you later." So she leaves the house, and she makes her way over to Sabrina's house, where she kind of gives some jump scares to some kids, and Sabrina sees her mask and is freaked out at first, but was like, "Carly Beth, that's you?" And Carly Beth's like, "Yeah, don't you like my mask?" after she puts it on a second time. And yeah, and then Sabrina's like, "Well, I hope you get to scare Chuck and Steve tonight." But as Sabrina starts to observe Carly Beth's behavior, she starts to notice that Carly Beth's not acting like herself. She's acting really mean and mean-spirited, and Carly Beth's trying to chalk it up to it's just being Halloween, And then it cuts off part 1 with her throwing a big fit with Sabrina. Then part 2 opens up with that scene, and Carly Beth tries to like calm down, and they go, they kind of split off from each other, so Carly Beth can go scare Chuck and Steve, which she corners them at a cemetery. She's looking around everywhere for them. She mistakenly identifies like a group of kids a couple of times here and there, thinking they're Chuck and Steve, but it's not them. But eventually she ends up to the cemetery in town where Chuck and Steve are hiding out, counting their candy and, playing around in there. And she manages to finally scare them with the plaster of Paris head, which actually talks to them and says, "Help me, please help me." It's such an iconic scene, by the way. And it scares them and makes them run off, terrified. And Carly Beth laughs and is celebrating and decides to bury the plaster of head Carly Beth into the ground as like a symbol to say, hey, the old Carly Beth is dead. So she decides to go back to Sabrina's house to meet up with her and, get the mask off and eat some candy. And when she gets to Sabrina's house, this is where the story takes a big 180. This is where Carly Beth discovers that this mask may or may not be stuck to her face. And she starts to panic. Sabrina is suggesting calling the fire department, but Carly Beth freaks out and says, this can't be my face. There's no line to this mask. I got to figure out a way to get it off. So she's running out of Sabrina's house, and she's pleading people like, I'm supposed to be me, but I'm not, and saying those to kids to creep him out. But really, I think she was being honest in the situation, which makes that scene even more unnerving when I think about it. But she makes her way back to the shop owner's place of business, and he's waiting there expecting her. And she runs into the back room and says, I need this mask off. And he basically tells her, I can't. These masks, they become your face. That's why I didn't want to sell them to you. And Carly Beth screams in torment. Very brutal in the sense of Carly Beth just feels utterly defeated when she hears this news. And I remember the scene, she's staring in the mirror, this is a great scene. She's staring in the mirror, crying, screaming, and the mask owner's trying to consult her about the situation. But really, there's nothing you can do unless you do this. And this mirrors the book as well. Carly Beth needs to find a symbol of love. And that may be the way to remove the mask. But it will only remove it for the second time. If she ever decides to put the mask on a third time, it will stay on forever. So Carly Beth, after hearing that, she gets basically chased down when she discovers what her symbol of love is going to be. She gets chased down by the other haunted masks, which float and come to life, and follow her out of the mask owner's shop, the shop owner's mask shop. And she runs, throughout the town back to the cemetery where she buried the plaster of Paris head. And she pulls it out and says, I'm Carly Beth. This is me. I'm Carly Beth. And in the episode, it's kind of different from the book. As in the book, she puts the plaster of Paris head over her head. As in the episode, she just waves it to them and the masks scurry off. And then once, it's right before midnight, and then she realizes that she can pull the mask off after, and she's like, okay, I gotta go home now. So she heads home, and her mom's worried sick about her. She's like, Sabrina's been calling here worrying about you. Why aren't you in your duck costume? What's happened to you tonight? Why are you here so late? And she, is asking Carly Beth all these questions, and Carly Beth is like, you know what? I'm just glad I'm home, and I'm glad I'm here. And then there's a weird thing that happens at the end, and kind of similar to the book, actually pretty spot on to the book, where, Carly Beth brings the head home and the mask home. Let's just say there's a twist at the very end, and that's where it leaves it. And that's basically the Haunted Mask episode in a nutshell. Off the bat, the strengths of this episode, I want to say this now. Catherine Long has pulled a Daniel Radcliffe for me, and every time I think about Carly Beth, even with reading books that she's in these days, I think about Catherine Long. That's how well she performed this character. And I think she probably gave the most iconic performance in the whole show's history, which to me makes her Carly Beth my favorite Carly Beth iteration of all time. I mean, it's just amazing. Timothy Bond did an excellent job kicking off the Goosebumps television show with this episode. It's so... It feels so much like Stein, and it feels so specific to, like, there's so many ideas about this story that just feel, like I said, so specific that you can tell that it comes from Stein's personal experience. And part of that leads into the charm of this story overall. And on paper, it's one of the best stories in Goosebumps history, so it's really hard to mess up something this good. And luckily for the TV show back in the day, they basically nailed this episode for what they were allowed to do. They did change a few things, like the pumpkin patch scene in the beginning of the story. I like that they did that, despite I did like the science fair bit in the book, I think, just as well. But what the episode was trying to do is throw the viewer into the setting of Halloween. It was trying to make it feel cold. It was trying to give you that atmosphere as a viewer, and I really appreciated that. The script writing was really good. The music score was excellent. And I hardly ever bring the music scores up in the episodes, but the music score rocked in this. It was great. Just the pacing of the episode was awesome. Didn't skip a beat. Didn't feel too repetitive. It was a little bit repetitive, but it was just enough to kind of nail home how Carly Beth was changing with the mask on and stuff. And it keeps you invested throughout the whole, 42 minutes this episode runs. And I think back to this anytime I think about the Goosebumps show. This is a automatic default to one of the first episodes I think about when I think about the TV show. It has an everlasting impact on the viewer. It's far from forgettable. It is very, very memorable. When it comes to negatives, honestly, I don't think I have a single negative about this episode at all. Nothing that I would actually deduct points on. But I do have a little criticism about the episode, and I just want to kind of put that out there. And my main criticism with the episode is that it puts the revenge aspect of Carly Beth's story, like either way you look at the episode or the book, there is a little revenge note kind of highlighted in the book, but the book is also more of an exploration of how Carly Beth is changing, and the motive to get revenge on Chuck and Steve is there, but there's a lot of, like, I don't know, like there's parts of the book where Carly Beth is thinking in her mind a little bit. Even though it's a third-person book, there are some things that lead the reader to believe that it's just more than a revenge story. At first, with this episode, you can tell the revenge bit off the bat, and you can tell that where the story was going to go in that revenge, direction. I think part 2 kind of course-corrected what part 1 was setting up and kind of brought it back to Carly Beth and her own personal experience and the real trauma that's going to happen to her because of this mask. And that's where it really starts to highlight more of the inner struggle Carly Beth has with herself, especially near the end of part 2. But like I said, I think the episode kind of points out the revenge aspect more than the book. And I don't know if I really like that or not. But I also don't think it's a problem enough to deduct points. So I just want to say off the bat, that is a criticism I notice about the episode version of the story. But it's nothing to take away on. So when it comes from a 0 to 5 star rating, I'm easily going to give this a perfect 5 out of 5. I think this is a perfect episode for what it is. It's definitely in the top 3 best the show has to offer. So yeah, let me know in the comment section if you have watched this Goosebumps episode, The Haunted Mask. Did you love this or did you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.